which were about as we see them now. But his Grand Vizier came to such a grisly end in them that Cosus, in a fright, walled up the entrance again. He said the Vizier fell into a well, but he had the cellars filled in and later abandoned the palace itself, and built himself another in the suburbs, from which he fled in a panic on discovering some black mold scattered on the marble floor of his chamber one morning. He then departed with his whole court to the eastern corner of the kingdom and built a new city. The palace on the hill was not used, and fell into ruins. When Akuthal I revived the lost glories of Korshemish, he built a fortress there. It remained for Tsotha-Lanti to rear the Scarlet Citadel and open the way to the pits again. Whatever fate overtook the Grand Vizier of Cosus, Tsotha avoided it. He fell into no well, though he did descend into a well he found, and came out with a strange expression which has not since left his eyes. I have seen that well, but I do not care to seek in it for wisdom. I am a sorcerer and older than men reckon, but I am human. As for Tsotha, men say that a dancing girl of Shadazar slept too near the pre-human ruins on Dagoth Hill, and woke in the grip of a black demon. From that unholy union was spawned an accursed hybrid men call Tsotha-Lanti. Conan cried out sharply and recoiled, thrusting his companion back. Before them rose the great shimmering white form of Sotha, an ageless hate in its eyes. Conan tensed himself for one mad berserker onslaught, to thrust the glowing faggot into that fiendish countenance and throw his life into the ripping sword stroke. But the snake was not looking at him. It was glaring over his shoulder at the man called Peleus, who stood with his arms folded, smiling. And in the great cold yellow eyes, slowly the hate died out in a glitter of pure fear. The only time Conan ever saw such an expression in a reptile's eyes. With a swirling rush like the sweep of a strong wind, the great snake was gone. What did he see to frighten him? Asked Conan, eyeing his companion uneasily. The scaled people see what escapes the mortal eye, answered Peleus cryptically. You see my fleshly guise, he saw my naked soul. An icy trickle disturbed Conan's spine, and he wondered if, after all, Peleus were a man, or merely another demon of the pits in a mask of humanity. He contemplated the advisability of driving his sword through his companion's back without further hesitation, but while he pondered, they came to the steel grill, etched blackly in the torches beyond, and the body of Shukili still slumped against the bars in a curdled welter of crimson. Peleus laughed, and his laugh was not pleasant to hear. By the ivory hips of Ishtar, who is our doorman? Lo, it is no less than the noble Shukili himself, who hanged my young men by their feet and skinned them with squeals of laughter. Do you sleep, Shukili? Why do you lie so stiffly with your fat belly sunk in like a dressed pig's? He is dead, muttered Conan, ill at ease to hear these wild words. Dead or alive, laughed Peleus, he shall open the door for us. He clapped his hands sharply and cried, Rise, Shukili! Rise from hell, and rise from the bloody floor, and open the door for your masters! Rise, I say! An awful groan reverberated through the vaults. Conan's hair stood on end, and he felt clammy sweat bead his hide. For the body of Shukili stirred and moved, with infantile gropings of the fat hands. The laughter of Peleus was merciless as a flint hatchet, as the form of the eunuch reeled upright, clutching at the bars of the grill. Conan, glaring at him, felt his blood turn to ice, and the marrow of his bones to water. For Shukili's wide-open eyes were glassy and empty, and from the great gash in his belly his entrails hung limply to the floor. The eunuch's feet stumbled among his entrails as he worked the bolt, moving like a brainless automaton. When he had first stirred, Conan had thought that by some incredible chance the eunuch was alive. But the man was dead. Had been dead for hours. Peleus sauntered through the opened grill, and Conan crowded through behind him, sweat pouring from his body, shrinking away from the awful shape that slumped on sagging legs against the grate it held open. Peleus passed on without a backward glance, and Conan followed him, in the grip of nightmare and nausea. He had not taken half a dozen strides when a sodden thud brought him round. Shukili's corpse lay limply at the foot of the grill. "His task is done, and hell gapes for him again," remarked Peleus pleasantly, politely affecting not to notice the strong shudder which shook Conan's mighty frame. He led the way up the long stairs and through the brass skull-crowned door at the top. Conan gripped his sword, expecting a rush of slaves, but silence gripped the citadel. They passed through the black corridor and came into that in which the censers swung, billowing forth their everlasting incense. Still, they saw no one. "The slaves and soldiers are quartered in another part of the citadel," remarked Peleus. "Tonight, their master being away, they doubtless lie drunk on wine or lotus juice." Conan glanced through an arched golden-silled window that led out upon a broad balcony, and swore in surprise to see the dark blue star-flecked sky. It had been shortly after sunrise when he was thrown into the pits. Now it was past midnight. He could scarcely realize he had been so long underground. He was suddenly aware of thirst and a ravenous appetite. Peleus led the way into a golden-domed chamber, floored with silver, its lapis lazuli walls pierced by the fretted arches of many doors. With a sigh, Peleus sank onto a silken divan. "Silks and gold again," he sighed. "Tsotha affects to be above the pleasures of the flesh, but he is half devil. I am human despite my black arts. I love ease and good cheer. That's how Tsotha trapped me. He caught me helpless with drink. Wine is a curse by the ivory bosom of Ishtar. Even as I speak of it, the traitor is here. Friend, please pour me a goblet. Hold, I forgot, you are a king. I will pour." "The devil with that," growled Conan, filling a crystal goblet and proffering it to Peleus. Then, lifting the jug, he drank deeply from the mouth, echoing Peleus' sigh of satisfaction. "The dog knows good wine," said Conan, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "But by Crom, Peleus, are we to sit here until his soldiers awake and cut our throats?" "No fear," answered Peleus. "Would you like to see how fortune holds with Strabanus?" Blue fire burned in Conan's eyes, and he gripped his sword until his knuckles showed blue. "Oh, to be at sword points with him," he rumbled. Peleus lifted a great shimmering globe from an ebony table. "Tsotha's crystal. A childish toy, but useful when there is lack of time for higher science. Look in, your majesty." He laid it on the table before Conan's eyes. The king looked into cloudy depths, which deepened and expanded. Slowly, images crystallized out of mist and shadows. He was looking on a familiar landscape. Broad plains ran to a wide, winding river, beyond which the level lands ran up quickly into a maze of low hills. On the northern bank of the river stood a walled town, guarded by a moat connected at each end with the river. "By Crom," ejaculated Conan, "it's Shamar! The dogs besiege it!" The invaders had crossed the river. Their pavilions stood in the narrow plain between the city and the hills. Their warriors swarmed about the walls, their mail gleaming palely under the moon. Arrows and stones rained on them from the towers, and they staggered back, but came on again. Even as Conan cursed, the scene changed. Tall spires and gleaming domes stood up in the mist, and he looked on his own capital of Tarancha, where all was confusion. He saw the steel-clad knights of Poitain, his staunchest supporters, whom he had left in charge of the city, riding out of the gate, hooted and hissed by the multitude which swarmed the streets. He saw looting and rioting, and men-at-arms whose shields bore the insignia of Pelia, manning the towers and swaggering through the markets. Over all, like a phantasmal picture, he saw the dark, triumphant face of Prince Arpello of Pelia. The images faded. "So," cursed Conan, My people turn on me the moment my back is turned. Not entirely, broke in Peleus. They have heard that you are dead. There is no one to protect them from outer enemies and civil war, they think. Naturally, they turn to the strongest noble to avoid the horrors of anarchy. They do not trust the Poetanians, remembering former wars, but Arpello is on hand and the strongest prince of the central realm. When I come to Aquilonia again, he will be but a headless corpse rotting on Traitors' Common. Conan ground his teeth. Yet before you can reach your capital, reminded Peleus, Strabanus may be before you. At least his riders will be ravaging your kingdom. True. Conan paced the chamber like a caged lion. With the fastest horse I could not reach Shamar before midday. Even there I could do no good except to die with the people when the town falls, as fall it will in a few days at most. From Shamar to Turancha is 5 days' ride, even if you kill your horses on the road. Before I could reach my capital and raise an army, Strabanus would be hammering at the gates, because raising an army is going to be hell. All my damnable nobles will have scattered to their own cursed fiefs at the word of my death. And since the people have driven out Trosero of Poitain, there's none to keep Arpello's greedy hands off the crown and the crown treasure. He'll hand the country over to Strabanus in return for a mock throne, and as soon as Strabanus' back is turned, he'll stir up revolt. But the nobles won't support him, and it will only give Strabanus excuse for annexing the kingdom openly. Oh, Crom, Emir, and Set! If I but had wings to fly like lightning to Turancha! Peleus, who sat tapping the jade tabletop with his fingernails, halted suddenly, and rose as with a definite purpose, beckoning Conan to follow. The king complied, sunk in moody thoughts, and Peleus led the way out of the chamber and up a flight of marble gold-worked stairs that led out on the pinnacle of the citadel, the roof of the tallest tower. It was night, and a strong wind was blowing through the star-filled skies, stirring Conan's black mane. Far below them twinkled the lights of Korshemish, seemingly farther away than the stars above them. Peleus seemed withdrawn and aloof here, one in cold, unhuman greatness with the company of the stars. "There are creatures," said Peleus, "not alone of earth and sea, but of air, and the far reaches of the skies as well, dwelling apart, unguessed of men. Yet to him who holds the master words and signs and the knowledge underlying all, they are not malignant nor inaccessible. Watch, and fear not." He lifted his hands to the skies and sounded a long, weird call that seemed to shudder endlessly out into space, dwindling and fading, yet never dying out, only receding farther and farther into some unreckoned cosmos. In the silence that followed, Conan heard a sudden beat of wings in the stars, and recoiled as a huge bat-like creature alighted beside him. He saw its great calm eyes regarding him in the starlight. He saw the 40-foot spread of its giant wings, and he saw it was neither bat nor bird. "Mount and ride," said Peleus. "By dawn it will bring you to Turancha." "By Crom," muttered Conan, "is this all a nightmare from which I shall presently awaken in my palace at Turancha?